Hi, in this video we will create a Shopify online shop together, which you can then use directly because we will use a real example product, and in between I will give you valuable tips from me. I will also give tips and tricks about construction and marketing. Because I have a lot of contact with big companies and larger corporations with high online shop sales through our company Adverfly, I know exactly what works and what doesn't. So I would suggest grabbing something to eat and drink and then have fun with the tutorial. Then let's get started. To do this, we first need to create a Shopify account, which we'll do now. My recommendation here is that we do not create the account, but that we can visit the shopify.com/free trial offer page, and then we can start the free trial phase here. The advantage here is that we can test it for free for 3 days and then only pay €1 or $1 for the first month, depending on your location. That's why I would suggest that we enter the email address here. I'll do that now too. Then click once on Start Free Trial, which we will do briefly. Choose a password here once. Now click on Create Shopify Account. But here we get a few questions. You can answer the questions, but it is not necessary. That's why I can say, hey, I'll skip this for once. Here we can then select a plan. There are now 3 different plans. One's basic, normal, and advanced. I would always recommend basic to start with. This is simply because you can change your plans at any time. In short, the differences are simple, or the biggest differences here are that you simply have to give different percentages in fees. In this case, that is 2.1% and 30 cents. Here it is 1.8% and here it is 1.6%. But here you also pay a lot more money, e.g. here almost €400, which doesn't make sense for everyone. That's why my recommendation is to start with this plan, and then, for example, when you have scaled and are making much more sales, then you can later switch to the Shopify plan, for example, and later to the advanced plan. That means then click on Try Basic here. Here we then have to select a payment method. I personally recommend PayPal or credit card, as is usually the case with companies. With SEPA, blockages can often occur, which means that something is blocked or not, for example. That's why my recommendation is that you use PayPal or credit card, preferably a credit card. In my case, that would be a credit card. Let's do that now. Then I can click subscribe once. Now I have to verify my credit card. I'll do this quickly so you don't have to wait. It has now been verified. Now I have to provide further information. In this case, the only thing missing is the telephone number. Now I can click Save Business Address once. Now I've landed in the Shopify dashboard, so to speak, in the main dashboard of Shopify, which some of you may already know, and now we'll discuss everything, and I'll show you here too, how to create an online shop and which mistakes you should avoid. Before we create the shop, I would recommend that we confirm the Shopify email address so that we have already done that. This means that after we have created an account, it is important that we simply open our email inbox and then confirm the Shopify email address that we received. Also check the spam if you doesn't find it. After I opened the email and then clicked confirm, I land on this page, which means we have confirmed the email address once and can continue here, as we can see. Now we can say, hey, that we want to visit the store by simply clicking here, which we'll do now, as you can see. And then we end up back on this page where we were before. Before we go through the points here, my recommendation is that we set everything here to the correct language. This means that we then open the settings here, as we see on the screen. So open the settings here at the bottom left, and then go to languages here on the left side in the simple Shopify menu. And here you can then say that the main language in this case should be English. For example, if you now sell in another country, for example, Canada, Australia, England, Germany, etc., you can click on the 3 dots as shown here on my screen and then say, hey, I want to change the language. In this case, let's take English as an example, and then we can see here that the checkout is now in English and also the theme. So a theme is the design of the shop, in case some of you don't know that, so that when we create the design later, we don't have to change the language afterwards, because that takes a little more effort, so we do everything right beforehand. And yes, my recommendation here would also be what many people often do wrong, what I often see when I'm in discussions with shop operators, that they say, hey, I want to reach many languages now, I want to reach many countries now, because you can reach more people. However, that is the wrong approach. Every country, every language is different, as an example. Marketing strategies look different. The shops have to be adapted differently because the culture is different. So my recommendation here is that you should start with a language or a country and then just work your way up to grow sustainably. For example, if you have now selected a certain country and make your first sales and profits there, then you can work with this profit, which means, for example, that you can simply make better translations, adapt the shop better, because at the start there are no sales. Without profits, it is simply a challenge to create an online shop for several countries at the same time and then market it, because there are often too many differences. Like the shop that I showed at the very beginning in this video, which made several million euros in sales, that was only in one country. In this case, it was a German shop in a German-speaking area, and exactly. Then, if you have selected a language with your country, you can click on save here. In this case, it is in English, so it is not clickable, and here we can then click here on general and then add further information here. In this case, I will click on the pen here, as we see here on my screen, and then I can enter the shop name, for example, in which case we'll make a chocolate shop in this example. That means let's take chocolate as an example, and here on the right we can add the phone number for the store. I'll leave it at my number, and then the email address here, as we can all see. That means once we've done that, I can maybe write shop behind chocolate and add it. So chocolate shop, and then I can save it here, which we'll do briefly. When we have saved that, then the updated version up here in the menu will also be the email address. Regarding this email address, this is not the email address that is publicly seen by the customer, but this is the email address from which you receive Shopify notifications, for example. If something happens, an order has come in, or something similar. It was also mentioned here that only these messages are sent and how the customer emails, etc. are now changed. Regarding the name, you can simply choose any name you want. My recommendation is to check that you can actually use the name, for example, whether other companies have the rights, that you simply look at the name register to see whether you can use it at all, whether there is already a brand, and that means you can develop your creativity regarding the name until you find a name that you like, and simply choose a nice name that matches to your product. There are also numerous name generators, such as the Shopify generator itself. Just Google it. For example, if you can't think of any ideas, that means you can choose something nice there and then enter it here. So let's continue. Of course, I'll explain the other points in a moment, but we'll start here first once we've clicked on X, which we'll do briefly. Continue here at the top right, and yes. So here we have to-dos from Shopify. We can skip this part, which means there are no special things that we need to do here, just for your information. It's now a mini guide from Shopify, but that's not necessary now. So we'll just go to the next point, which in this case would be orders, right here at the top left of the menu. Orders are very simple, and some of you may already know them. Here you simply have when an order comes in, like, hey, customer A bought the following order with products for this value with this discount code and similar delivery address. That is, here you can then carry out all the orders, check the current status, and you can also say here, hey, if a customer has now ordered manually, for example, by calling you, or ordered differently, then you can also add an order here manually, although this is done less often because people buy, let's say, automatically in the online shop. Of course, that's always the goal, which is why, let's put it that way, it's irrelevant here, and that's exactly why you can leave this page. And here on the left we have shipping labels. These are shipping addresses. That means you can then, for example, install an app from DHL in this case, or DPD or other apps, and if now a person buys, then you can automatically generate a shipping label. You have to register as a business customer with the respective platforms. In this case, it is DHL, for example, and then simply create an account there, and then you can e.g. use such apps so that the shipping labels are created automatically, making packing and shipping easier. Then there are also cancelled checkouts, which means Shopify also shows when customers have now put something in their shopping cart, then subsequently visited the checkout, entered the email address, but then did not purchase, which is very often the case. This you can then e.g. see here, and if necessary send an email address with, hey, you haven't completed your order. Here you still have a discount code. You've probably experienced it yourself, and exactly. Then we come to the next section, which would be the products here. I'll just move me quickly to the right, which we'll do briefly, then you'll have a better view. And here you can then create a product, i.e. which products are sold on this online shop. We will also discuss exactly how we create a product, but only after we have discussed the other points. And exactly, there are for products also collections like categories, inventory, or collections here. For example, you can also make collections. Of course, I will show you everything in detail. Then there is also an inventory. If you want to use Shopify as inventory management, then there are functions such as, for example, which are rather irrelevant for the start. That, for example, you can now place orders with suppliers via Shopify. That is also possible. Then there are still transfers. If you, for example, sell something locally that you say, hey, the inventory, 10 products are sent from location A to location B. So you can manage that here too. But as I said, it's not necessary at the start. Then there are gift cards, which are popular. For example, if it's someone's birthday, you can also sell gift cards, which we all know when you need a gift quickly. And exactly, I think that should be clear to everyone. Then we come to the next point, that would be here you can analyze the customers, which means that when a customer buys, an avatar or profile is created for the customer every time. You can, for example, see, hey, where does this customer come from? How often has this customer bought? And other information, like here we have a customer overview. So then there are segments, which you can imagine like groupings, as an example, as we see here examples from Shopify, like customers who have bought at least once, i.e. customers who have purchased at least once, customers who have subscribed to the newsletter, customers who have now, for example, in the last 30 days, put something in the shopping cart and didn't buy it. Here on the right, we can now see the percentage value of it. And yes, like you can also create groupings yourself, but this is not necessary to start. My recommendation here is always to keep the start as simple as possible, let's put it this way, and then later you can make fine optimizations, test it yourself and see what works now and what doesn't. As an example, if we create this now and maybe want to reach these people, with 3 people on this list, it won't have much of an effect. But later, if, for example, we have 100,000 customers or 10,000 customers, then that can have a big effect. For example, when now sales will be 5% higher. So my recommendation is that you ignore this part for now, and yes. So then we come to the next point, which is the content. And these are the meta objects here. These are meta information, as an example, if you want to give specific information for products, but it is more intended for technicians, so it is not important. That's why you can skip this part. And then we go to the files. And when it comes to files, you can also use Shopify as a hosting platform, which many of you probably already know. If you now, e.g., want to upload videos, pictures, or other things, other files, then you can click on upload files and then upload a file here. For example, I will do that now so that everyone has seen it once. So I have now uploaded a sample book, as we can see, and if I now move the mouse over and click on copy, then I can enter it here in the browser. I'll do it here for a moment. And so the image is now hosted on the internet, and I can now access it with the link, i.e. you can then simply upload images, videos, or other files here, and exactly. Then we move on to the next point, which is finance. Finance is now just a view where, for example, you now get the payout. If you now, for example, have received 10,000 euros, then Shopify pays it or collects it first, and then Shopify then pays it into your bank account, i.e. here you can see, for example, the bank payout from Shopify and exactly when the next payout will come. So then let's move on to the next part, which is the analytics part, which you saw at the very beginning. This is where all the statistics are and exactly what you see, for example. It looks like this if it is now in an active shop, that you can easily see the sales here. How many customers have bought again, for example. In general, what the conversion rate is. And of course, there is also a lot of other information such as here. But this is now empty in this new shop because no orders or anything like that have come in. Then we continue. Here we have the reporting part, i.e. here you have even more detailed reports. For example, you can see, hey, how many people have now visited which page? How many people have now used which devices? That's what this analytics part means, which we now have up here. This is a general overview, but here in the reports, this is now more in depth. So if you want to look deep into the data, i.e. that you can, let's say, see better and gain new insights. It is also used less frequently, i.e. the analytics part is simply more important in order to get a precise overview of what is going on in the shop and exactly. Then there is a live view here. The live view is then what is now happening live. I can show you that in another shop, then it will look like this, in which you can see, for example, what's happening right now, how many people have bought now, what's been done today. Then you also have a cool globe view where you can, for example, you can also see the places that have now bought and exactly, i.e. here you simply have a live view or live statistics. Here we have the live view as the name suggests. You can now see live here what is going on today or at this moment, so everything is presented clearly and visually. That means here you can see, e.g. how many people have now bought, how much sales did the shop make today, how many sessions are there today, how many orders are there today, the top locations for today, or even here now, the last 10 minutes, how many people put something in the shopping cart, how many people put something in the checkout, and how many people bought something, i.e. that you can simply see live in the moment, as the name suggests, that at that moment you can simply see everything visually for better insights. Then let's move on to the next part, which is the marketing part here. I would also recommend skipping this part because my recommendation is that you don't run campaigns via this now, but that you run the campaigns directly via the Facebook Ads Manager or Google Ads Manager, which many of you probably already know because you simply have more control, you are more professional, and you can scale better. That's why I would recommend that you simply skip this part here as well. And specifically regarding Facebook, Google, and TikTok, we have also made separate tutorial videos there. I have linked the videos in the video description so that you can also watch it after this Shopify tutorial video. Now let's say traffic, i.e. to get customers to your site who then buy. Then we'll continue with the discounts, and here you can create discounts. Of course, I'll show you that later. But first, before we create a product, before we create the discounts, we first have to create the design of the shop. And that would now be, as the name suggests up here on my screen, as we can see here, the online shop area or the sales channel, if you were to label it like Shopify, i.e. if you then click on it here, which I do briefly here, then we end up here on the page and here on this page. We can create the design from the shop. If I now move my camera to the left again, we have here this. We can customize it. If I click customize here, I can, for example, add a heading. I can then add blocks. I can then add product categories. So if I have created a category, then I can then display it in the shop. As you can see, you can do a lot of things here, but you can also do a lot wrong. And exactly before we customize this here, we first have to select a theme. You should probably know a theme. I've already explained it, but you can simply imagine it like this, that it is simply a prefabricated design. Because if I had to design everything from scratch, that would require no technicians and would be very, very time consuming. That's just the advantage of Shopify, that there are some nice, simple and professional themes where you can create a very, very nice design in a short period of time. And to add a theme, you can do the following first. For example, hey, I would now like to add a theme by simply visiting the Shopify store by clicking on it here, which we'll do briefly. Then I end up here on the page, and here on this page where I can look at all the themes from lots of industries. I can also see it in the preview. We can do that, for example. Let's do it as an example. This is a Shopify theme here. This is a standard Shopify theme, which is also free. If I click on it here, for example, then I can click here on the demo store, which I just do briefly. And then I can just see in the view what kind of theme it is. And right here we have the desktop view. Then I can also switch to the mobile view, like here. And then we just see that everything here is very, very modern. And exactly, of course, there are not only free themes, but there are also themes that also cost money, which if I go back, here we have Prestige, which costs $380. There are, let's put it that way, more functions, maybe more pages. If I look at this here too, for example, and scroll down, then we also have some things here, but they were also similar to the previous theme. That's why my recommendation regarding the theme is that you simply start with the free theme, because the Shopify themes are already extremely strong. Of course, there are 1 or 2 functions which are not available now, but these functions are often not necessary at the start. So it is more important that you simply create a shop first. Use a standard theme if you have a small budget. Of course, you can always customize this theme, and later if you want, you can switch to a special theme that just costs money. And yes, this is often not necessary because companies, including many larger ones, not just small ones, simply use the Shopify standard theme and then customize it later with the experts, for example. If you have a clue about technology or design, for example, if you make more sales, which is not necessary at the start, and that's why we can go back to Shopify. And here, for example, select one of the standard themes, i.e. the standard themes from Shopify, which are also free, are also in the theme store or down here, and you can also see a small preview here. My recommendation is always that you say, hey, that you use this Dawn theme, which I think is good, and then perhaps make small adjustments accordingly, because this Dawn theme is very, very effective because it was created very, very well, especially because it is from Shopify, and it is also very, very modern, as we had previously seen in the example shop. Now we have to edit the theme, i.e. we can click on customize here on the right, which is what we'll do briefly. So now we are in the editor area where we can easily customize the theme or shop graphically. This is now structured as follows. Here on the left, we have the structure. And here on the right, we can adjust the things. For example, if I say, hey, I now want to adjust this here, I'll click on it. Then the structure is here on the left, and I can adjust the content here on the right. This is not the case for everyone. It depends on the screen size. If the screen size is a little smaller, then this is also shown here on the right, here on the left. But with an average laptop, the structure is on the left and the content is on the right. And it is now structured as follows. Shopify works with sections and blocks. Now, for example, if I want to add something down here, e.g., here is a section of text where I can say, hey Shopify, I would now like to click add section, and here I can add sections as we all see, actually quite simple. If I move the mouse over, I can see, for example, what exactly that is, e.g., here we have a featured collection like this. Here we have a specific product if we want to highlight that. Here we have a collection list if I now have several categories, e.g. now in clothing, hats, t-shirts, sweaters, jackets, and so on. So different categories. Then we have rich text here, which simply means that this is a section of text. Then there is an image with the text. Very simple. An image, as the name suggests, is on the left side or on the right side, depending on what you set, and a text on the right side. It's simple but good and is often used. Then there is an image banner, which means there is an image in the background. And in the middle area, there is simply a section of text, as you can see here in the preview. Exactly. A slideshow. A slideshow is when you now have several pictures and can now move them. You've probably seen that when you bought something where there is simply a box and the pictures always change, or you can just move them with the mouse or with your thumb. Simple but very good function in my opinion. Then we have a collage that simply gives you more insights or a deeper category. Then multi-column, as you would e.g. can see, it's just that you have several blocks of text next to each other. A multi-row, you've probably seen it before, that is, it's something like a rich text and it's structured on the left, structured on the right, structured on the left. You know what I mean? If you, for example, want to represent certain points, certain functions. Then we have collapsible content, which means you can imagine it like this FAQ section if you have a question. And once here, an email sign up if you now want to collect newsletter emails, and once here, a contact form if you now, let's put it this way, want to collect support requests here, or if people have questions, they can use this contact form, so nothing complicated. Then there is a video area. Blocks are also possible, which means that you can also create a blog here on Shopify and then, for example, display the blocks on a page. Custom code is more for the technicians, and last but not least, another page. That means you can also create pages and sub-pages in Shopify. I'll show you that too, is also a cool feature. And exactly, these are the blocks from this theme. As I had already said, there are already some things in here. There are also special blocks at the top right, so sections. Those are just from apps. In this case, no apps are installed, or this is a standard app from Shopify. But if you later have a review app like this, i.e. a rating app where your shop is rated by customers, then you can also add a review field here, for example. This means that the blocks and sections of the apps are now generally displayed here, and which you will then install later. What an app actually is. I will also show you later how to install them, how to use them, and which apps you should install to start with. Now you can do the following for testing. You can say, hey, I would now like to add a text block. I'll do that now, just as an example to show. After we click on add section here, we can then select rich text here, and that will then be added down here, as we can all see on my screen. And if I click on it here on the left, or click on it on the right in the preview, then I can select it once. As an example, I'll click on it here, which I'm doing for a moment. Then I'll have selected this once, as we can see, or I'll just click on it again down here, then I'll have selected this once. And then if I want to change the headline because I want something different, then I can say, hey, I can then label it however I want. For example, chocolate shop. And down here, for example, I can click on it again, then I can add a subheading or even a button here, which is also cool and you can definitely use it, which for example now also has a certain function. For example, shop now or see more. And here I can also say, hey, I want to redirect this to a page depending on where the customer needs to go. I can say this should link to a collection category or a specific product page, or to a normal page or other pages you want, or on a blog site, which many people also do. There are a few things. Before we create the first version here, we first have to do the following. I'll delete this example below by simply clicking on remove section here, and then it's deleted here. Now we first have to do the following. We replace the logo here. This means that we have to click on settings here, which we will do briefly. This is now this sections blocks area. And down here we have the settings. And as you can see here on my screen, there is also an area which is now the first column for the logo, and here we could upload a logo, and that's what we're doing now. We're even going to create a logo together now. My recommendation is to use Canva here, because the advantage of Canva is that it is very, very simple, and there is also a free version of it if you are on a budget. This means that we visit canva.com once and can click on Start Design, which we do briefly, And here we have to create an account. I'll just use the email address now. Then we click once on next, which is what we do now. Here we can then choose a name, as you can see. Then we have to confirm our email address once. You get a code for this. I'll add it here. The code was in my spam folder, so also check the spam folder when you do this. And once we've done that, you can choose what you are here. In that case, we are just a small company, to give an example. And here you can click on skip once. Skip, 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 skip. Skip and skip. So now we're inside Canva. There is also a Canva Pro version, but you don't need it. Let's just say it's not necessary, but you can of course use it, and it's not expensive either. But the free version is also sufficient for most purposes. The difference is simply that the Pro version has perhaps 1 or 2 more functions and has a few more design templates. That's why you have to decide whether it's worth it or not. In that case, we don't need it. Now you can do the following. We could click create design once and create the logo. Or we can also do the following by saying, here are already templates from Canva. That means we'll just see what we need now. In that case, we need a logo. And Canva also has a special section for logos, which suits us perfectly. That's why we'll take a quick look here. We click here on more, which we'll do briefly. And then we can search for logos that suit us. So logo, and then we have a logo here. Let's click on it, which we'll do briefly. And here Canva now creates, or rather Canva now shows us, let's put it this way, or here you can now choose a specific logo. This means that because we now have a chocolate shop, we can simply enter chocolate here. Let's see if we can find something there. Chocolate. And here we see some logos. And here was the difference again. For example, on the right we have the Pro version, but on the left is the free version. Here we also see that there are, let's put it that way, also very nice free versions. And that's why we can take a look together here to see what's out there and see what we can choose that suits us. Exactly. Now spontaneously. We see now. I think at first glance, I personally think this is the most beautiful. That's why I'm going to select what we're going to do here. You can just see for yourself what suits you best. Just specify a few topics. And exactly, I'll click on it here, which is what we're doing briefly. You could also change the colors here, but these colors are already selected. That's why I'll leave it like that. And exactly, that means we created it here. And now we can do the following. Export it with the correct format so that we can use it in our Shopify shop. Or you could also do the following. Say, hey, I want to hear now. Add something else, a different letter, or designate it differently. Instead of an O, I can also add an A here. It's also possible, but we'll leave it like that for now because it also fits perfectly here for the example shop. And then once we have found the right logo and perhaps made 1 or 2 optimizations, for example, you can click on it here. We can also change the color. It's actually super easy. You can also add a few things here with all the elements. This means that you can theoretically add another box here too, but that's not necessary for this logo because it's so appropriate. And if everything fits, then we can do the following. If you have now selected a suitable logo, you can click on Share Once. This is now a download function here at the top right in the Canva menu, as we can see, and here we can download it once. As an example, let's click on Download here, as can be seen here on my screen, and then click here to download again. And boom, it's downloaded, quick and easy, and it's now ready to use. Now, once we reopen Shopify, then we can add the logo here by dragging it in directly or by clicking on it here and adding it once. I'll do that now. I'll see you again when I'm done. So I've added that now, as we can all see here. And now we have to do the following. Namely, I can now see that the format is simply much too large, which means there is simply too much surface area, which simply looks ugly. That's why we can open Canva again, which we'll do briefly. And instead of like a square, we now want it to be like a rectangle. And that's why we can do the following first, by then selecting everything here, as we see, and then copy it once. So, copy. We can then go back again by clicking on Menu at the top left of Canva and then clicking on it here, which we'll do briefly. Then we can create a new design in the upper left. And here we can create an individual size with custom size. Then I'll just enter 500 here and perhaps 200. Then this size is created. And then I can paste what I copied here, which we'll just do briefly. And then adjust the size. So, exactly. You can drag this here. Then there are lovely purple lines to see if you've reached the end. That's what it looks like. Zach, we've reached the end. And then we want to center this again by simply sliding this down, as seen here, until this line appears. So, this pink line in the middle is now centered, as we can see on my screen. And now the format is better. And now we can export it again or download it by clicking on Share, which is what we're doing. Then click on Download. then click download once more. So it has now been downloaded once, as we can see at the bottom right. And now we can open Shopify again. Then we can then click on change and then click remove image once and upload it again. So now it's been uploaded. As we can now see here, the format is better. Now we can also make a few changes by saying, hey, we want this to be a little bit bigger by pulling this higher. For example, like this, we see here, 150. Let's check if that works. Now it's a little bigger. I think it needs to be made a little smaller so that it fits well. And that's exactly how it fits in size. You can also view the mobile view directly by simply clicking on the mobile phone symbol in the top right corner, and it looks wonderful on the phone too. Then you can also save in between. Of course, this is always recommended if the browser crashes. And exactly, we saved once. If we scroll down, we have the mobile view. And yes, like that. Then we uploaded the logo, quick and easy as you saw, and we'll leave this on the mobile view now too. That's simply because, of course, it always depends on the target group. But for most target groups, for most products, most people also buy via their mobile phone, as you probably know. Accordingly, it is always necessary to follow the following approach: mobile first. This means that the mobile phone is created first. The mobile phone has the most priority. If we now do the following again and say, let's go back to the section area. So click on it here at the top left, as you can see here. Then we can click on the header again, which we will do briefly. And here on the right, so on the left, are the structures, what is now set up when something should appear. And on the right, we can better represent this structure graphically. And here you can do the following things. For example, if you scroll down now, which we'll do briefly, and scroll up slightly, then it always appears here. You can see that quite easily. I scroll down again, it's gone, and up again it comes out. So it's also a cool feature if you don't want it. For example, you can adjust it here on the right by saying, hey, it should always be displayed. That means if I scroll down now, it doesn't disappear, it's always there. I can also say, for example, it should always be there, but just displayed a little smaller. That's always very, very cool. For example, if I scroll down now, it will appear smaller as we see. But I would recommend that you leave this here on scroll up. You can also set it so that it is completely removed, also possible, or nothing happens. That means if I scroll down here and scroll back up, it doesn't appear. That means it's just right up here in the front. My personal preference and also my recommendation would be to say, this is on scroll up. For the following reason, if I scroll down now, I want people to have more space, see more space, to buy this product, for example. If you now want to scroll up slightly, you can reach the interface more quickly and save a lot of time, which often increases the conversion rate. So conversion rate means how many people visit the website and then buy, i.e. this percentage value. That often gets better. Of course, you always have to test this in individual cases, but now from our experience, it has a better effect. Then of course there is also, if you open the desktop itself again very briefly, you can also say in the desktop, hey, where should the logo be displayed? On mobile, it was now in the middle. On desktop, it was now on the left. This is now also the case here. You can just say, hey, it should be in the middle too, or once up here, center. That is also possible, but in my opinion, this is the nicest option. That's why I'll leave it like that, because it harmonizes nicely with the mobile phone. If I now quickly remove these blue lines here by clicking on them once, then it is also possible, as we can see, that I have this gray line. Maybe you can see it better on the mobile phone by simply saying very briefly, I mean this line. You can also say, for example, I don't want it, I'll leave it out, then it won't be displayed anymore. We see it on my screen, then it's all a white area like this. I personally like this, so I'll leave this here. That means you can click around here and see what suits you and what doesn't suit you. The things are also very nicely labeled here. Depending on the team, there may be 1 or 2 more columns or 1 or 2 less, but you can always click here, for example, and see what kind of change there is. There is also a name. That's why you just have to look at what looks nice and what doesn't and choose what suits you. Exactly, that's why you can scroll up here again and of course click on save every now and then, as we have learned. Let's put it this way, always safety first, because if, for example, the browser crashes, then at least you always have the last point where you save something. Before we go any further, it's important to mention that once you've finished building an online store, now here in Shopify, then you come to the topic of marketing. When it comes to marketing, most people place a Facebook ad, a Google ad, a TikTok ad, a Pinterest ad, or other platforms we all know. The shop I showed at the beginning, This has also grown in the long term with Facebook and Google Ads. And when it comes to advertisements, it is always recommended that you use a tracking tool, an external tracking tool. This is simply because if you make campaigns on Facebook and want to evaluate them afterward, the Facebook numbers in the dashboard are just estimates. This means you can't be sure if these numbers are correct or not. With new advertising accounts, the case is that Facebook simply no longer has any sales there. As an example, the shop has 10 sales. For example, Facebook now only shows 3 sales, depending on the target group. Or later, for example, if you have now spent 100,000 euros, it can happen, even if there are now only 10 orders, for example, that Facebook somehow shows 15 orders, which means that you are simply blind in marketing. This is why external tracking solutions are crucial. Since the large corporations block each other, they can no longer measure themselves. And that's why external tracking tools can measure what many people already know, such as our own tool, Adverfly, which you can of course test for free. I will show you how to install this later. Because you have the right measurements again through external tracking solutions like Adverfly, you can easily optimize the right advertising campaigns again. So that, for example, you don't invest advertising budget in the wrong campaigns that, for example, didn't bring any sales at all, even if Facebook says so. Now, let's continue with building the shop. First, we need to do the following. Because we are now creating a chocolate shop here, we first have to add a nice picture back here so that it becomes harmonious and people get hungry. This means we can now click on the image here or on this area. There is now no blue box displayed here, as we can see here, because we have just deactivated it. That's why we can activate it again. And if I click here again, which we're just doing briefly, then we've selected this once. And now we first have to change the image in the background. Now this is a sample image and a dummy image from Shopify. And now we want to add a nice, delicious chocolate image. That's why we click here on the left on the page structure once on image banner. And then we can add an image here on the right. This means that you probably also have your own pictures of your product. This means, for example, that you have very, very nice pictures that you then upload here and then use in the background. In that case, I'll just use the free images from Shopify to give an example. There are also other sites such as Unsplash. There you can simply search for chocolate, for example. And then you get, let's say, some chocolate pictures that you can then use, for example. Or of course, you always have to look at what they have stated here as a license. And exactly, in that case, I'll just use the images from Shopify. They also have a tool like that. That means you can say the following, for example, hey, I'm looking for chocolate pictures now, chocolate. And then I'll just look to see if there are nice things available and exactly what would fit. Then I'll just click on more. Here it is, of course, recommended that you upload your own pictures. For example, if you took product pictures and exactly then, I'll check further here. I think the pictures from Unsplash were nicer than these. Maybe this one. No, that's too dark. This is too empty. Not that either. That looks nice. Maybe you can use this here. If I then click on select once, I have selected the image once, as we can see. Then I can go back again, which we'll do briefly. So the image is selected here, as we see. And here you can also do the following. Maybe this black area, this black overlay is a bit too much. Then you can make this overlay to 100, for example. Of course, you can't see anything there. Or I can make it a little bit smaller. But now the problem is, especially if I set it to 0, that the text is unreadable. That's why you can maybe do the following thing here. Say, hey, I'll leave it at 30, maybe 20. Or perhaps 25. So then we did it once to 25, as we see. And now it looks wonderful. And yes, we need to change the text. For the text, you can simply do the following. There is also a cool AI function from Shopify. If I click here on general text, as we can see it here, and then I can say, for example, okay, what are the advantages now? And with regard to the text, I would also recommend that you only mention the advantages and not mention any functions. For example, there are often shops that I visit based on my personal experience where I don't initially know what it's about. And secondly, I don't get any real advantages either. As a customer, I'm not interested in what function it has, but rather, as a customer, I am interested in what advantages I get from this. And exactly, I'm just going to use this as an example, so it's of course recommended that you take your time and see what your customers say. What do your customers think is cool? Just present your USPs. In this example, I'll just use sugar-free chocolate, sugar-free and low calories. For example, you can say the following. Here, how should Shopify generate the examples? You can now say tone expert. Then you can say, for example, tone playful as seen here. Depending on what suits your brand, Then let's take a look at what's most beautiful here. I think maybe because we sell chocolate here now, I take the following. I'll test playful. Then I can click generate once, which we'll just do briefly, and then I'll see what suggestions Shopify gives me. Shopify hasn't given me any suggestions at all, as we can see. I'll click generate again. So now I have received some examples. If I want to look, if they don't suit me now, then I can click on generate again, for example, which we'll just do briefly. I'll just take a look here. Well, then I'll take a look further. They're still a little too long for me, so maybe this, but of course this is a little too long here. This is certainly better. Low calorie, delicious taste, and of course, sugar-free snacks. And yes, what is noticeable here is that it is thinly written. I'm not a fan of it because it's difficult to read, especially the headline, as you've probably noticed too. That's why I can select it here. And click on bold once on this B, so now it's written in bolder letters. And of course, I personally always find it a little nicer. What else you could perhaps do here is to say, hey, that's a little too big for me, so maybe I can do it on medium, as seen here. Small is way too small, so that's out of the question. Extra large will probably be too big. Extra large. Large, I believe medium or large. Large is better. So then I added it here, as we can see, and perfect. Then of course I recommend that you always press save every now and then, and that will save you a lot of headaches because, for example, your laptop's battery may run out or your PC may freeze, etc. So always save from time to time, like we did here. Then of course you are always on the safe side. And what I would also like to change here is once this button. That means it has to stand out more. That means I can click once here on the left or just here, but I click once here on the left, select the button. And then I can say, hey, I don't want it outlined right now. I don't want a border. I want it to be bold. So let's remove the tick here. And it looks like this. Well, then we did it like that. And now we can also choose the location where it will be rebroadcast. In that case, does it also make sense to maybe send it to the all products page? If you have special events like Halloween, Christmas, Easter, New Year's Eve, then you can perhaps send directly to the Christmas collection, for example. Of course, that is also possible. Then of course you have to adjust the image accordingly and adjust the text. But if there is, let's put it this way, no special event, then you can just send people to all sides. That's also possible, of course. Or if you only have one product, if you now have such a special product, then you can also send this person directly to the product by clicking on product and selecting the product. In this case, there is no product here because we have not yet created the product. Of course, we're going to create that right now. And exactly, now you can of course also change the button text here. Shop now, for example. Oops, there we go, shop now. And that's exactly it, as we can see. You can also add a second button here. It looks like this, for example. For example, learn more. Then, for example, two buttons will be displayed here. You can also select the link here and just adjust the design here, for example, like here. So I think that looks a little better, but a second button is not necessary here, in my opinion. That's why I click on delete. And then click save, which we'll do briefly. So then we added that once, as we can see. And now we have a nice section. That means that with the logo up here, with the image, with the text, it looks a little nicer. And exactly like that. What you can now do here is make the color white, which doesn't seem so great to me now. That's why we can also do the following here by clicking on the settings again and editing the colors as we see here on my screen. I'll fold in the one with the logo here. This is the area where we created the logo. There are other things too, like colors, the second most important part. So, and here we can say, hey, that we now want to adapt a schema here. Namely, let's put it this way. You could say here, hey, I want to make a red background now. Of course, that doesn't look great, so we'll leave it on white for now, as it was before. And exactly, I would like to change the colors of the main buttons here because I don't like them, for example. And you can do that, for example, by saying that you can now change the background color of the button. Maybe a light brown here, as we see. Okay. Done. And nothing has changed now, as we can see. That's because we've now changed schema 1. And then we have to see what kind of scheme is used, for example, by not clicking on the button as some might think, but on the section element. That's called section, and a button would be a block, for example. And you can see, for example, okay, scheme 3 is now used. I could also adapt schema 3 here, but I can also say, for example, hey, I just want to change the schema, for example, like this. But now, of course, it doesn't look great again because this has now been changed to black. That's why I would suggest that you leave it on scheme 3 as we have set it here now, and then change to scheme 3 here. All right, done. Then we have the button color here, as we can see. So here we have brown. Now we'll set the text color white. And done. Then we now have, let's say, something nicer here. Maybe I'll use another brown than the one we have. All right. It just didn't save it. Well, exactly. Perhaps a little lighter. So, slightly lighter. This looks good. Then click save, don't forget. Then we change that once. Then we first have to do the following. We first have to create a product. So down here we just have examples from Shopify, but we now have to create a product here so that we can sell our own things here later. We can do that now by going back to what we are doing briefly, as we can see. And go to this product area and then click on add product, which we will do briefly. And here you can now, for example, use chocolate without sugar as a product name. But you also have to add a product description, which of course should not be missing in a good shop. We can do that too, perhaps using the AI function. I'll do it now in this example. My recommendation is that you spend more time here. And exactly, for example, you can say chocolate-free taste handmade. We'll set the tone to playful and generate. Add again, generate again. And then I can do it on keep. Then an example has now been added. Of course, this isn't the prettiest example, not good for selling. Of course, you can also add a few emojis here if you want, if it fits. You can also do the following things. Now, of course, this is a text. My recommendation is always here according to the motto. A picture says more than 1,000 words. That one also says, for example, I'll just add pictures in the description. For example, by simply showing the advantages in pictures. That is also possible. Of course, you can also use Canva as an example here. And we have to upload a picture one way or another. That's why I would imagine that we pick out a picture very briefly. In that case, I don't have a chocolate company now. Let's find chocolate images from Unsplash. Let's find chocolate pictures. And yes, we could do the following. Let's take a look at what a product image could look like. For example, chocolate bar. So I just searched a bit and found an example image. What we can now use here for this example store. And of course, you should upload your product here. That's self-explanatory. And exactly. We'll now add this here as a product image. We can add that once by then simply placing this on here or pull up with drag and drop. So the product has now been uploaded. Now we can also set a price for it, i.e. what the customer should pay. I'll just use 7.99 euros as an example. Here on the right, we can also add a comparison price, as we can see, as an example. Oops, I accidentally added 799. But of course I mean this. So, a price. Added. Here on the right we can say, before, for example, it was now this price. And exactly. Then there is simply this crossed out price. And on the left, for example, is the real price on the product page, showing what it currently costs. Of course, I will show you that now. Here we can say, for example, you can now add a tax to the product, as we can see. What you can also do is that you can add here, for example, a price per kilo, important for foods, depending on the product. This is an obligation. We've done that here, for example, as we can see. We now have a unit price, not necessary for all products, or rather a duty, but in this case, for example, with drinks or something similar, it is often important. You should look at that, whether this is important for you or not, and exactly. In this case, I'll just leave it here for now. And yes, then I'll just click here on food per item. Here you can actually leave it blank. For example, you can enter the product costs here. The customer doesn't see that, but maybe that's for internal calculations now. You can leave it empty. We often have external things for this, for example, such as an Excel spreadsheet or similar. And yes, here at the bottom, we can adjust the inventory. You can say once, hey, it's not supposed to track at all. I have endless amounts of these chocolates. But if you now have 100 of them, you might say, we have only 100. You can still adjust the setting if it is sold out. If there's a 0, you could say, Shopify, I am still selling. You have to decide whether you want it or not. I wouldn't recommend that because a product you don't have, of course you can't sell it either. Accordingly, I will now uncheck it. If we only have 100 of them, then we can only sell 100 pieces. You can then add an item number or barcode, as we see here. This means, for example, that you have an item number and you can also add a barcode here. It's not a problem either. Is often necessary, for example, if you now have a product, if you have numerous products. Then you have to be able to distinguish between them later, especially if you have external things connected with Shopify. In this case, I'll leave it out since there's only one product here. Then you can also enter the weight here. It is also recommended that you enter this if possible, so take your time, especially when you now create shipping labels. This also makes the calculation easier. You can say, for example, that because we are now selling it for 100 grams, we will then also have a weight of 100 grams. Of course, there might also be packaging weight and similar things, perhaps paper weight, and so on, things you need to consider. Then you can also add variants as we see here, like for example, what flavor it should have, how large it should be, whether you want something big or small. You can do this by saying, I click on this plus sign, and then you can now say here, like for example, the type of chocolate. Here you can select options. These are generated items from Shopify created with AI. For example, you can say that there is a white chocolate, there is a dark chocolate, and there is a milk chocolate. You can add further variants. That is also still possible. What you also need to consider is, for example, you add information in the product description. As I said, this varies from product to product, e.g. how many calories it has, ingredients, allergy information, etc. That sometimes there is information that needs to be added here. Of course, you would have to take a closer look at this, but it is very important and not forgotten. But you can easily add everything here. And yes, if we now go back to the variants, which we'll do briefly, the variants are that we simply have the variant here. In this case, we now only differentiate by type of chocolate, and now not by others. And now not through other variants. That's why I can just click on done, which we do briefly. And once I've done that, we have a list at the bottom, as we can see. You can now do the following. Namely, you can then choose the price here. As an example, if now milk chocolate costs maybe €1 more, you can say, hey, instead of 7, it's now 8.99. So maybe the manufacturing costs are more. But you can definitely give different prices for different variants. Of course, you can also change the inventory. I'll set this to 100, for instance. And if we only have 50 of the milk chocolate, for example, you can simply make 50 out of this. And what's also cool is that you can upload an image for each variant here. As an example, you can upload a picture of a white chocolate here. You can upload a picture of a dark chocolate here, and you can upload a picture of a black chocolate here. Super easy, everyone understands. And when the customer later clicks on a variant, it is usually displayed automatically depending on the theme. And then let's scroll down further. Down here, we can add the category meta fields. These are also more technical things, although you might want to categorize a few things. And down here we have a Google view like this, because every time I create a product page, you can usually access it via Google. And here it would look like this. Now, if I want to adjust things, I can change it here too, as we see. For example, I have now taken the things that I had added up here, but if I would like to specifically adjust this so that it is displayed differently on Google, then you can do that here so that you know. And exactly when I've done all that, then I can maybe add a product type here on the right of my screen. As we see, this is often necessary if, for example, you have several categories and types for the product you sell. Like, for example, clothing items. So jackets, pants, jeans, shoes, and so on. For example, if you now have several sellers who sell your products, you can also add a seller, as we see. And here you can also select a collection in Shopify. As an example, as we can see, we can do that together to show you. In this case, I'll also use home for the collection, that it always appears that way. And you can also add tags down here. This is only for internal things. For example, for internal structures. That means the customer doesn't even see it. And yes, then click on save like we do here. And if I go to collection again on the left, which we'll do briefly, then I can create a collection here, for example, like here at the top right, as we see. And then I could say, for example, that this is now, there are several types of chocolate. I'll take bar chocolate for now. Then I can also add a category description, as we see, but it's usually not necessary because you don't always see it. And here you can do the following. You can say, hey, I want to select the products manually. Or I then select products that have a tag, for example, which I had shown before, and it would then work automatically here. Or you can say, I'll select products that fall into this category, depending on pricing. or weight. For example, if there's a kilo of chocolate, you can create a category for chocolate with certain weights or chocolate with certain titles. You know what I mean. You can also do the following by saying, hey, I'll do this manually. Then I can choose the product down here, for example. Click add. Of course, we save it, we don't forget it. And then this product is now in this bar category. And if I then go to products, for example, then I have the list of our products here, as we can see. And if I don't have a vendor, so I don't select a vendor, then the shop is automatically set as a vendor by Shopify, as we can see. And here we have the collection, for example, on the right. Of course, you can also customize the collection here. When I say, hey, it's not a bar of chocolate, I can then remove it here, as we can see, and then save it once. In this case, it is a bar of chocolate. And exactly that's why I click on discard. So we've created the first product. Very simple. And now we have to add the product to our site so that it can be found. When I go to the online shop again, and then click on customize, then it should actually be displayed here. But because we don't have a category here, as we did without it when creating the product, I would even suggest that we simply say, hey, I don't want to represent a collection or a category here, but rather delete this and then click on add new section, and then I can say featured products. This means I'm showing a specific product. Then I'll click on it here. And then I can select the product here at the top right of my screen. So on the right, as mentioned, is content, on the left structure, and select here. Then we selected the product right down here, as we can see on my screen. What you can do here now is you say, hey, for example, a few things don't fit right now, namely chocolate shop. I don't want to show the seller what you see here. That's why you can do the following here by saying, hey, this text, we see the seller, I don't want it here. That's why you can say that I would like to delete what we are doing briefly. Well, then that's gone. Then you can add additional blocks, for example, as we can see here on the left. This is also possible if I now have an item number, I can add that. Or I can also add an icon with text. Then I have an area like this here, for example. I can also move this on the left up here. Then it looks like this, for example. Or if I push further up, for example, you can also add it here. For example, you can perhaps show advantages here too. And if I then click on these icons, for example, then I can say here on the right, hey, I want to use a different icon now. There are a lot of things there, as we can see. So here's a whole list of them, and I can add the text there too. But I'll go ahead and remove that now. I would definitely recommend working with these icons because let's say they can easily showcase the benefits. And exactly that's why I'll click on delete like this. And yes, that means you would just have to click around here and see what just looks nice and what doesn't look nice. And accordingly, you can add this here, as we now understand. The important thing here is that I will show you later what a real shop looks like. So a real shop that has done a lot of things well that you can learn, what you need to pay attention to, what, let's say, the setup should look like. And exactly here in this part, I'll just show you how to use this editor in Shopify and then show you the details later. And exactly. And later you can then analyze in more detail and more deeply what exactly you should do for a structure. And exactly. Then you can click on save here once more. And yes, that means we first have a shop down here as we see. And when I click add to cart, for example. So, for example, I can put something in the shopping cart here and then look at the shopping cart directly as we can see. For example, by clicking here. So, and then I end up here in the shopping cart as we can see. And if I go back now, then you can also do the following, namely, for example, I can click on settings. There are several options here. This means you can click through and test them. However, I find it extremely important to mention the shopping cart as it allows us to choose the options. I just clicked on the shopping cart and then a pop-up came down from above. You can also change that by saying, hey, I either want to be redirected to the page or I want something to come from the page, like if I click on it now, which we'll just do briefly. All right. I click. And you should probably know that too. I personally like this the most. Therefore, I would recommend leaving this here. And exactly. Then I can, for example, click save again, which we'll do briefly. And yes, This was, of course, the homepage. You can definitely add many more sections here, design everything very nicely, very easily, and personalize it. Of course, there is also another very important page, which is the product page. If I then click here on View Full Details, which we'll do briefly, then I'll end up here on the product page. This means that I can edit the product page here, and it will then be valid for all products. And here I can add the following things, for example, such as the FAQ section, which is also very important and can avoid a lot of support. That means I can then click here and add a new area, like what I showed with, that was right here. Then I can say, for example, hey, this is now the FAQ section. All right, FAQ. You can also add sub-headline up here. I'll leave that for now. And here, for example, you can answer specific questions. Just as an example, I'll click here. Then you can add the text, for example, text 1. And down here you can add something if you open it up, such as description, which we type briefly here. If I then open up here, for example, then this description is right here at the front. This is definitely very practical too. And of course, we also have the product page here. It is also very simple to set up. And options like share, I would definitely remove that. We also have to remove it from the home page. Let's do this now because people should be on the page and not be distracted and end up not buying. And yes, then there are things like pay with PayPal. You can also disable that by saying, hey, dynamic checkouts shouldn't be shown, and instead you should always go to the cart first. I would also recommend that, let's say, everything is a little more structured. And yes, I can click on save. Go back to the previous page because we have the share thing there too. And here you can say that this should be deleted. All right, it's gone. And save again. So now to the design. If I remove these blue lines again very briefly, then we'll have everything here for the most part. Let's put it that way. Completed. So the functionalities. Of course, you now have to design everything even more precisely depending on the product, but that's the beauty of Shopify. As you've noticed, we were able to create a shop very quickly, set up product pages, add products, and include prices and variants. That's what's nice about Shopify. Here's the advantage. Even if you have 1 million or 10 million visitors on your online shop, Shopify is extremely scalable. You might recognize this from other systems where you need to host it yourself, which often struggles with 10 or 20 users. For example, I know of cases that were on big TV where people were looking for investors or received attention from a big influencer and then got a lot of traffic at once, and the episodes were then broadcast, which then caused that the shop is simply crashed because, for example, they used a different system and the servers were simply overloaded. That's less likely with Shopify because they're simply, let's put it that way, more scalable. Here's a quick summary of the advantage compared to other solutions, because simply as a non-technician, you save a lot of time. And in the end, you also have, let's put it this way, a very stable shop and also a very, very nice shop, because everything here is also very modern. As we see, most of the themes are also very, very modern. Then let's continue briefly with the other points, namely, I had also said that we would take a look at the pages. Or rather, first the blogs. And yes, with Shopify, you can also easily create blogs, as we can see, i.e. you can, for example, here go on create blog post. And afterward, you can say, for example, blog 1 here. And here, text 1. That's all. Here you can also add a picture, and if you just save it, or down here you can also select the author or what categories it falls into. And then when I click save once, we've created a blog already. You can create a blog in Shopify that quickly. And if I now click on preview, like here, then here's the blog. So that means the title, text, and of course you can also add images below, as always, and some other things. Videos are also possible. You can also make text bold. You can italicize text. All of this is possible here, meaning you can then create blogs here very easily and very, very quickly. So that's all about blogs. Very, very simple process. And of course, the same goes for the pages. If you want to create a page now, then a page can be used for a contact form, for example, if you now want to have a subpage, which is also often needed. And here it is that you can say, hey, here. Now I'll click on it here and we'll have a contact form here that was automatically created by Shopify. And here on the right, Shopify has the feature where you can say, hey, use the contact template. They've already prepared it in the theme. And if I click on it, for example, I can open the contact form here. Or if I just want to create a normal page, I can click on add page here at the top right, which is what we'll do briefly. And just like with the blog, I can enter a title here. Title 1 and once, text 1. So once I've done this and click save, which we'll just do briefly, then I've created very simple a page. And it looks like this, for example. You can do that, for example, if you, let's put it this way, if you want to create a help article, you can simply create a help article page and then simply explain things to people there with pictures and text. So that is definitely possible. Or you can also create an About Us page as a sub-page like here. And yes, that means I keep going back because that was everything here, very simple. And then we come to the part with the navigations, here on the left in the menu, and this are here the menus. So regarding the menus, you can simply edit the footer menu here or create a new menu. In this case, I'll click here on the footer menu, which we'll just do briefly. This means that what is currently in the footer can be modified. For example, I'll delete that. You can say, for example, hey, I would now like to link the shipping page, for example. So, and then you can e.g. say either that you create a page, or you can also take these policies from Shopify, which I'll show you exactly what they are in a moment. And then you can e.g. say, there's currently only a privacy policy available, so I'll make one from that. Privacy policy there. Then I'll select this once here as shown here. You can now create more things like this. Of course, I will show that too, e.g. for shipping, imprint, terms and conditions, cancellation rights, and similar items. Then I can click add here. Then I can of course add more things. That's also possible if you're wondering. Like for example, what I just said with maybe a contact form. So this page that you created. You might say, hey, then I'll click on page. You can also redirect to products. So you can forward everything here. Then I click once, for example, on pages. And there was title 1, which we had just created in the example. And once contact, which has already been created in advance. And if I click on add, then save, and then go back to the themes, because in the theme here in the editor, I can add that too by clicking on footer here, for example. And there's nothing down here at first. That's why I can do the following. I would like to get rid of this email system because it's bothering me right now. That's why I'm clicking away here. And exactly, social media icons can also be removed. You can also remove that. You can also do away with payment items. So you can remove everything here, for example, very easily. Exactly. What you can do here now is to say, hey, I would now like to add brand information or a menu, for example, because a menu is also a blog. So, and then I can say, for example, that a menu will now be added here and it will look like this, for example. So I added it here and exactly, then it's in here and boom. Adding a menu is so quick and easy. The same applies up here too. There was also a menu for upper area. Theoretically, I could do the following here too by saying, hey, I now want to select a different menu up here. And yes, exactly, I can do that. For example, say change menu. Then I could theoretically also use the footer menu up here. Well, that's what it looks like. Of course, it doesn't make sense then. That's why I'll use the main menu. And exactly what we saw down here is that in the theme, this legal information is already displayed down here where I point with the mouse. This means that it is already there automatically. Personally, I'm a fan of it being on the footer. Of course, let's put it that way. It doesn't make any difference now. That's why I click on it here. Oops. If I click on it here, it will automatically take me to the page. So go back to the menu for a moment and activate this inspector again so that you can, let's say, select these preview things. If I click on it here, for example, and once here left on footer, then to the left like this, then I can say here, hey, I don't want to show them at all and remove the tick. That's why if they are removed down here, for example, and then I click save once. And that's how quickly you can add a menu. So for example, you can create a menu for certain categories, a menu for certain products, a menu for different items. You can simply add all of this here because theoretically I could also display the main menu down here by simply adding a menu here, which we'll do briefly, and saying, hey, I now want to display the main menu here and add it. So that means I can click on save here, which we'll just do briefly, and that's it. Well, then I'll go back again. And that was now the navigation part. Every time I make changes here, for example, adding something to the footer menu, then this will be automatically updated in the shop. Then I can click on preferences here. When it comes to preferences, that I can here enter the title. That's what is now displayed on Google. For example, if I search for McDonald's, then we have the title here, and down here we have the description like that. And you can say that here too, for example, like this, chocolate shop. And below we also have a description. I'll write in the description. And if I then click on save once, for example, then once it's available here, like that. Then you can also do the following things here, for example. If you now want to connect Google Analytics, if you want to connect the Facebook Pixel, then you can do it differently here, step by step. Regarding Facebook Pixel, we made a separate tutorial video on how to set it up from start to finish, then step by step. I also linked this in the video description in case you need it after the video. Then we have password protection as we see here. The current situation is that this shop is not yet finished. In order to see a preview, I can simply click on the eye here, which we'll do briefly. And then I end up here, as we see. This means that it is displayed here where I point with the mouse. But if I now want to give external access to it, then a password field is simply displayed, and you can easily deactivate that by simply removing this check mark and click save, which we'll just do briefly. Now, there is no password on it anymore, as we can see, and theoretically people could now buy in the shop, or theoretically, because we haven't added a payment method yet, we'll do that now too. But since the shop isn't finished yet, I'll leave it password protected, as we can see here on my screen. So then you can of course, you can also add a description here in this big box for the people who see the password page. But now you can do the following, which I'm going to show you now. Here we come to the settings. This is the case with the settings that we would then, here we were just now. Now let's move on to the next things here in the tutorial. Here we have plan. With the plan, what I said at the very beginning is that you can change this at any time with one click if you want. This means that you can easily change this here or deactivate the store here. That is also possible. Then we have the billing, as we can see. We have now stored a payment method. And every time something is debited or invoices, it will all be displayed here so that you know. Then we have employee accounts. Here you can simply invite employees, or in this case that is not possible because that is not possible here in the first plan, as we can see here. This means you would have to do it differently. If an external person wants to do something for you, or a freelancer wants to do something, then he can use this code that we see here that you then forward, and he can then send you a request. So he can then make changes for you, and that's exactly what means you can easily manage all the things here. Then we come to payments, because now that we have everything created, product, shop, texts, then we also have to activate that we can also accept payments. Otherwise the online shop will be of no use to us. Otherwise it would just be a very simple website. That's why we can click on Shopify Payments Activate. And once we have activated that, we first have to fill out all these things. As an example, submit details. Then we first have to click on submit details. And here Shopify will first ask a few questions that you now have to answer. Is necessary, because you definitely know with the payments that there are always, let's put it this way, is better checked by the entire system, which is why I'll fill it out very briefly. In this case, it's just a test shop, so I'll select it individually and click on next here, which we'll just do briefly. Then I would have to add my name, my last name, my tax identification number, email address, phone number, house number, and so on. That means you have to fill everything out here, as you can see, and then you can click on next, and once you've done that, you can adjust the payment methods. You can then say, for example, hey, I accept this credit card. For example, Klarna PayPal is connected differently. I'll show you that now. So, of course, you have to fill out the information here. In this case, because this is now an example store, I can't fill it out now, but once you have filled it out, you just get a menu where you can simply select the payment methods. My recommendation regarding payment methods is that you don't choose everything based on the motto that the more payment methods you have, the more sales you make, but that you choose the most important payment methods. Because if you choose too many payment methods, especially those that are not used in a country now, it can happen that the customer is given too much choice and gets confused. That's why it's always important to just look, hey, do these payment methods make sense? And if not, just leave them out. Then I go back again for a moment to PayPal. And with PayPal, it's like this. If I go back again very briefly, back one more time, and exactly with PayPal, it's like this. You can simply click on PayPal here. Then you just have to log in here with PayPal, which means, for example, if you click on Complete Setup, you just need to register here once or log in with your PayPal account. And once you have logged in, PayPal is already activated. This means you can activate it very easily and quickly. And to receive payouts, it's also very simple here. With PayPal, this is automatically transferred directly to PayPal, and with Shopify payments, where people can pay with different payment methods. Of course, you also have to enter your own bank information, and here Shopify will, depending on what you set up, process it every 14 days. Then let's continue with checkout. We have edited the product page, home page, and the product code. Now you also have to process the checkout. You can also edit a checkout a little more specifically and display other things. You have to do that here in the settings, and here you can say, for example, hey, I want either a phone number or an email, or I accept only email addresses. Usually, most often, email is used. Of course, you can also use a telephone number depending on the situation, but in most cases it is email. For example, you can also activate the following by saying, hey, I want to use this shop app from Shopify. For example, you can click on it as shown here to get more information that you can use such an app. I personally don't recommend this. You can of course test it, but we'll leave it here anyway. You can also set, for example, that people first have to log into a customer account and only then can they buy, so no problem. I wouldn't recommend it either, simply because, let's put it this way, this increases the hurdle, which simply reduces the conversion rate because you have to register in order to be able to buy. That's why a guest account is available in most shops, or is now even mandatory in some countries, where you can buy without a password or just with your email address, so the box is unchecked. Then you can also specify what customer information you want. A name, for example. Only the last name is necessary, or first and last name is necessary. I would recommend here that you leave it on your last name, simply because you don't have to fill out as much, and the last name is completely sufficient if, for example, a package is delivered. Of course, you always pay attention to the last name. Then you can add company names here, that you say, hey, the company name is optional, the company name is mandatory, or the company name is not displayed at all. If you only have a product that is now only aimed at a consumer and not at corporate customers, then I would leave it out. If this is a mix optional, if you only sell B2B, so business to business, then you can leave it as mandatory on required. Then you can do the following here. Add a second address. Of course, there is a normal address, such as where you live or where the office is, for example. And then there is the option to say that you can add additional information, for example, second floor, third floor, fourth floor, to help the package deliver or locate it faster. And here you can of course leave this as optional, so that the customers who fill it out now will know that they have to fill it in if they know themselves that this is a special place of residence through previous one's orders. And then we have here the option with the telephone number regarding shipping, whether to add or not add what you know from your online shopping. I wouldn't add it once to just less. Let's say to simply have to fill out fewer things. Then you can do the following here. Marketing options, you can do so in checkout. The ability for customers to subscribe to the newsletter at checkout. So you can ask, hey, are you interested in my newsletter? If yes, mark this here. Alternatively, you can say, hey, check this beforehand, and people need to uncheck it. You have to be careful here. This is definitely not GDPR compliant. That means people have to actively check it. This means it cannot be pre-selected. You can also do this with SMS. Then there's the option for tips, whether to accept tips or not. Depending on the niche, it can make sense in rare cases. I personally have never seen it when shopping, and for most shops, I wouldn't recommend it either, and that's why I would remove it here too. But the function is there if you want to accept tips, it's up to you. This might make sense, for example, if you have products that are very, very unique, perhaps handmade. In very special scenarios, you can activate this. Then we have the option here that you can set here, hey, the shipping address and the billing address can be different. Alternatively, you can say they should always match. Shopify also mentions that you cannot send any gifts, etc. Therefore, according to Shopify, it is advisable to select the top option, as we can see here. Then there is an autocorrect from Shopify that the shipping address is filled in automatically. I would always recommend it because it saves people time while typing. and fewer mistakes happen too. Then there is the option that you can say, hey, the billing address should not automatically be the shipping address, but that customers need to fill it out manually. The way Shopify describes it here, it only makes sense for gift shops, where the shipping address and billing address never make sense. As an example, I order this, but I'm giving it to a friend, so I enter their shipping address accordingly. That makes sense. This is the reason I would leave it out here, is because most shops aren't gift shops. If we then scroll down here and continue, we have the language that the checkout is in English. Then we have the following things here, namely that we can click on save here, which we just do briefly to apply all the changes. That's all about checkout. What the checkout looks like is also quite easy by just opening the shop again. Scroll to the product, then click on add to cart, then click on checkout. And this is what the Shopify checkout looks like. Now you can also do the following. Say, hey, that you want to add a logo. And you can do this by simply going back here, as we do here, clicking on customize. So in the settings, and here you can simply add the logo again at the top left. I'll do that now. So I added this once here, and here you can also change the option so that we say this once, hey, this should now be in the middle, once on the right or left you can set here. I would put that in the middle because we had that too. In navigation in the middle, everything is placed for the mobile phone and the like, so I would keep it like that, as we can see here. And yes, you can of course also change the size here. We had previously used an 130 pixels, so let's do it here at 130. Then you can also say regarding, because of the width, it shouldn't be in the middle, but rather you can say, for example, that it should go up to here. In this case, you would have to change the background color. But that's not necessary in this case, because I would recommend placing it on the left side checkout form because it just looks better in my opinion. And exactly, this is simply a matter of taste. I personally would lean towards this one because the space is then simply used better. Then you could also change the background color, add a background image as we can see, but I would leave everything as standard except maybe the colors down here in the menu. Okay, you can't see that in this case, but the standard button, I would then have it in the color of the shop. We had now used, let's put it this way, a nice brown, and let's say you could use a brown here if I do it like you can see here. Let's say, and you can leave the rest as it is. That means everything else fits. You could still use the option, which is also new from Shopify, that some of you probably already know, that they say that you now use a 1-page or 3-page checkout. For example, it looks like this if I now use 3 pages. That means then there is the information side, so to speak, then the payment side, or what's new at Shopify or has only been out for almost a year, the 1-page checkout, which we previously had automatically. And here everything is on 1 page where you can also pay, as we can see here. It's also, let's put it this way, recommended according to Shopify because it simply saves you a few steps. That's why we leave it at this variant. And I would also like to set this here at the bottom. Just a moment. So, checkout form. So it looks like this. Save. Now let's go back to the settings, and then we can continue with the customer accounts. I wouldn't recommend that you activate it now. You can activate it later. In the beginning, it is important that you make sales. That's why I would deactivate it here now. So, of course, you can activate it later at any time. That's not a problem if you see, hey, this works, so you know. You can activate it with 1 click and then install it somewhere, because then you have the option of having an order overview that people can, let's put it that way, save their things and so on. But my recommendation here would be to do it later, because then I would be more likely to combine it with payback things. This means that people are still motivated to buy. I wouldn't recommend simply registering now. It would simply not give the customer any advantages. Only later, when, let's put it this way, the advertising channels get more budget, the profits are made, sales are achieved, and it scales. And when, let's put it this way, if you want to get more returning customers, then you can just use this option. But then in combination with, for example, a loyalty program system, and exactly. Next, we'll discuss shipping, as packages must still get delivered. And we can then set that here, as we can see here. That is, here we have once Which countries do you ship to? In that case, I'll do the following for a moment and say, first of all, clean up here, just a second. For example, I'll get rid of this. I'll remove this too. And I'll get rid of this too, so. And delete. Now we have not a word yet. Now you can say the following, for example, I want to add a location now. In that case, I'll take it once, the United States. Now this is just an internal label up here. You can also be more specific and select specific regions. For example, if you select other countries, as we do here on my screen, you can then say, for example, I also sell to Germany. You can choose whatever you want. In that case, we only have an English language shop now, as we know, so I would leave that out. And then when I click done, we have a region selected, as we can see here. And now we can add shipping costs, and it is structured as follows. You can say that you use flat rate, which many probably know, or that you simply provide certain information, or if you have connected apps, you can do it based on weights, based on combinations, but in most cases you do it from a certain amount, in my experience. That's why you can now do the following here. You can say, for example, that we also have a preview right down here. Once filled out, we also have a preview below. As we can see, for example, you could also optionally add something here, such as like shipping, for example. But I'll leave it cleaner because that's meaningful. And here you can select the price, for example. You can say $4.99 or $3.50, depending on what the price is in your case. Now you can also say the following. You can also say, hey, that you say now, from a price of 50 euros. If you can do that, for example, that's valid. But in this case, we do it the other way around. We'll create another installment right away where it's free from 50 euros. Here you can then do the following. First, delete it. Save once, which means, so to speak, as is always valid. If the person now buys something for 50 euros in the example, then we can take the same thing, use the same thing as an example, only with the difference that we offer it for free if a person buys something over 50 euros. So, and we have now simply added it, as we can see. You can also quickly add the shipping costs, and then when we go back to the shop, here below we have the shipping methods. In order to be shown some, we first have to enter an address, but because we have now only selected the USA, we first have to change the country. However, no country is shown to us, as we can see here, because we first have to activate the country in Shopify, because in Shopify we now get the message that we now allow us to sell in this country. And then we go back again, click here, and need to add a market here, and that's just once, the United States. United States. And select or add a market here. This is once active now, as we can see here. So we have now added that here, and when we go back again, the message must now be gone. One moment. So the message is gone, as we can see here, and then if we go back to the shop and update the page now, then it will be shown to us here, as we can see on my screen. I'll explain to you exactly what's going on with markets when we get to that point. And here I can select United States here. And when I now add New York and add a street number, then this will be shown to us here. So $4 written in bold at shopping method. What Shopify has now done is that we entered everything in euros. They have now converted it into US dollars. So, for example, you can also set this here in markets if we now look at the area by clicking on settings, which we will do briefly. And here you could say, hey, it should not be rounded up. It shouldn't be done here either, so we deactivate this here. And it shouldn't be redirected either. Personally, I would recommend that you activate this. But for now, I'll just show you what I mean by that. Because if I refresh the page now, the original price should now be shown, which is now also the case here. $3.90, like that. Because we entered everything in euros. But since I recommend that you start with a country first, it doesn't matter if you do it that way too. Let's put it this way. It's definitely interesting for later if you want to have several countries now, so you can activate it again here like we do. Leave default settings. And if I update this again, let's say it will show $4 here because we have set $3.90, and that has now been automatically converted, as we can see here on my screen. But by starting with a country, that doesn't matter in this case. Then let's move on. Here you can set up tax matters, for example. Here you have to look at what you like best because the topic is different for many countries. For example, you can also downgrade to the old service. Shopify tax is new, for example, then let's say more functions, but you also have to pay more fees. And if I click on downgrade now, like here, then you can do it manually on everything here. You can also do basic here and select it, or you can use Shopify tax, so they tell you what you have to select. You should discuss exactly what you choose with your tax advisor, how he would like to do it best. That's why you have to take a look at what you choose. And exactly, if you have selected the point accordingly, for example, downgrade service, you can then select everything down here or add informations. Depending on the country, you may also have to enter the tax identification number, for example, in Europe. And you can also do more specific things down here, such as if we now have certain products and certain taxes, as we can see here in the menu, overwriting them, that's all possible here too. If you only sell online now, i.e. not in a store, that's not a problem. That just means from where all the things are shipped. If you now have local things or local shops, then you can also add a new location here, for example, where you can, for example, have things picked up. However, my recommendation here is that you ignore that for now, because if you now want to connect a local shop, then everything works a little differently. In my experience, most online shops only sell online, so you can leave it as standard here. And exactly because if you want to combine this with local things, then you have to consider a few other things, connect a few things. Also, for example, like here, installing an app or other apps regarding local payments so that everything is synchronized like this. Then we come to markets, which is also from Shopify. Here you can choose, for example, in which countries you sell. As an example, what we've just done regarding shipping, you can choose, for example, what Shopify can do here is that they can do automatic redirects and the like, which is also very practical. And yes, and that's just the case here. You just sell in which markets. Then we come to the apps and to the sales channels. Here we have the installed apps, as we can see. Currently, it's just the Shopify standard stuff. We will come to this point shortly. That's why I skipped this part, because the apps can also be accessed differently. Then we come to the domains, because it is always important that you have a domain, because you can reach the shop page via this domain, which of course we don't want now, but we want to add an existing domain for our example. What you can do now is say, hey, that you can now buy a domain through your domain provider or via other domain platforms like GoDaddy and then connect them. Most of you will already have a domain, so that's why you can click on connect existing domain here, like here. You can then specify the domain once. I'll do that here now, one moment. Then click next. There are always instructions here. That is always different. For example, if you have GoDaddy, for example, or if you have other platform for the domain, you would always have to look at it here. You can then simply click here on this link, and depending on the situation, you will find the instructions for the respective provider here. The only thing you have to do is just copy and paste these things there. You can usually do this within a few minutes. It's nothing difficult. Anyone can do it. It's just a copy paste thing, and then you can click on verify, and then the domain was connected, quick and easy. This also happens very, very quickly. Then we can do the following. These are the customer events, as we can see. That's everything that has to do with analytics and measurements here. This means that external solutions and external apps can be installed here, which then measure customer actions, customer purchases, and the like. This is possible here. I'll show you exactly how this works, and we'll do that too. Then let's move on to the notifications. Notifications is the following, namely, that you can now set the following here that I show now. That means, firstly, up here, customers see this email address if they, for example, buy something by e.g., see the order confirmation or other email addresses, and yes, that's why it's important to verify your email address and provide a correct email address that looks professional, such as team@shopname.com. So, then you can do the following first after the step. Here below are the customer notifications. Customer notifications, i.e., which emails the customers see by clicking on them here, for example. And here I can see the order confirmation, and here I have a preview of it, as we can see. I can then say, for example, hey, I want to edit the code now. This can also be done here with edit code. Then you could edit everything here, such as thank you for your purchase, change the name, and so forth. I would always leave it as standard because the standard things are already optimized. This is now gray for me because my email is not verified. I'll do that anyway. So I have now verified my email, i.e. my test email, and here I can change all the things, for example. But as I said, you can leave it as standard. Only if you need to change things can you do it here. Regarding the design, if the design should not fit, Then you can customize it up here, as we can see, by clicking on customize once, which we'll just do briefly, and here we can add the logo again. And then you can select the color again here, as we can see here. I'll do that very briefly. So choose color, done. Then I click save once. When I saved, we have a much better email right back because our logo and colors are there, as we can see here in the menu. This then also applies to all emails that you send, such as the shipping confirmation. For example, it looks like this now, much nicer. Then we'll go back there again. And down here, you can also add staff or employee notification. As an example, if an order comes now in your shop, that this is now displayed here, like up here at new order, whether this should be sent to this email, like, and you can then adjust that. These are internal things again and optional if you just want to. Then let's move on to the next points. For example, you can ignore the points, especially for beginners. That's simply because it's more technical stuff, like the next point. These are also, let's put it this way, for technicians. That's why you can skip it. Then we move on to the languages. We already set that up at the very beginning, so that, let's put it this way, if it was in the wrong language, if we designed the shop in the wrong language, then everything would have to be changed and adjusted again. That's why it's better to do it at the beginning, and that's why we can skip that part, because we've already done it. Then here comes customer privacy, as we see, namely the whole thing with the cookie banner, privacy policy, and the like. Here I would recommend that you simply activate the cookie banner, definitely because of the GDPR. You can either use the Shopify cookie banner, but then you would have to check whether it is GDPR compliant or not. But most of the time an external cookie banner is used. Either now, let's put it this way, if I have now deactivated the Shopify cookie banner, then I can now go to the app areas, for example. What I also wanted to show was to click on apps here, which we'll do briefly. And then I can then enter cookie banners here, for example. Because let's put it this way, briefly about the apps. Apps is the following. If I quickly click on search, with Shopify, you can add a lot of things with apps, let's put it that way. There are very many apps. There is almost everything in the app, and you can, let's put it that way, add functionality, add design things, add design changes, or even e.g. like now here, a cookie banner. Here I'll take a cookie banner, which is often used, and you can then install it with one click. Then click on install again, as shown here. And here you would have to confirm that, because this app costs about $3 with a test phase of 7 days, and which ends on the 12th. That's why I click confirm once. And now we have installed the cookie banner, or installed the app, as we can see here now, and now we have to install it in the theme. This is done automatically by clicking install once. And here we see the confirmation with the check mark, and it has been installed, i.e. installed but not activated. Activation can now be done with a button by clicking on activate. And yes, the cookie banner has now been activated, and when I go back to the page and then to the home page, then a cookie banner will now be displayed like this. However, let's put it this way, this one isn't pretty, in my opinion, of course. What we can do now is to present it more beautifully. We'll do that now by going back again to Shopify, and down here we can first do the following, which I'm showing now. We can set the language here again. As we can see, that is also possible. Here you can click on Banner Editor and display this banner beautifully graphically. First we have to do the following. Here at the top right is this word cookies. That doesn't look nice now, so let's get rid of it here like this. And then you can add the logo here again. The logo is added. Then you can maybe make it a little bigger, like that. And then you can also here, we need to do the same for mobile. Regarding the size, you can change the view here. If I put my camera down again, you can make mobile a little bigger. Oops, like this. One moment, so I would say I think 120 looks great. And desktop would exactly maybe be a little smaller. Like this exactly. That works. Now you can then adjust the colors. You can also do this by clicking on settings here, as we do here, and on colors. Then we do the green of accept. Change to brown, for example. Also leave it on green depending, but in this case I'll still take the color from the logo, like here. And down here you can say, for example, hey, I might want to do a gray there. And then maybe you can make it black here too and do the same thing. Oops, like that. click on it, and do the same here too. Text like that. Then I would maybe the same color as here, EF, EF, exactly, EF. It's the same background. And then I would do this with the same color as here, 6, 3, 4, 8, 1, B. All right. We then adjusted the color, as we can see here. Save once very briefly. And then you can also look at the mobile view, and again, it just looks much, much better than this. So then we have the logo here, and now it also fits with the banner. Now we can move on to the policies, as we see here, the last point. These are just legal things, for example, terms of service, shipping policy, and so on. Here in the box, you can then add all the shipping texts. Imprint can be added here. You can also use a template like this from Shopify. And once you've done that here, then it will automatically be displayed at the bottom depending on the setting, or you would have to add it in the footer. I'll do that now using an example. And then you take the template from Shopify once on publish. And then when I go back again, it just has to be displayed down here. In that case, it won't be displayed because we have changed that we do this with the navigation. If we then go back to navigations 1 second, and then once on footer, then you can do the following again here. Notice, then you can forward to the policies. Forward legal notice, and you can add it as quickly as we have seen. This was automatically installed by the cookie banner, so that people can edit it again if they want, and other things. And once I save it like this here, and refresh the page, then this is available here. Of course, you can now change the order, for example, like this, or something like that, once on save. Then let's take a quick look here, and not loaded yet, 1 second. So now it fits better here too. And exactly. Then let's move on, and that's all the points here. That was all the setting stuff. A lot of it only has to be set once and never again, so you have to take the time once, and exactly. And then last but not least, we have here too the discounts. When it comes to discounts, we can do the following. Then you can click on Add Discount, which we'll do briefly, and here we have the following, for example. Here we have discount code for the products. As an example, get 10% on an example product, e.g. your product. Then there's buy 2, get 3, the classic one, most people know it too. And then there is, for example, the same thing as above, only that it is based on, for example, this 10% of the order. And then there are things like free shipping, for example, which is also used very often. I'll take the following, for example. Here I can click on it once, like here. And here you can do the following, for example. Either people can say, hey, use code 10 one time, or you can also say that it is done automatically based on certain factors. For example, if they buy something over 50 euros and buy certain products, in that case, I'll do it with code because it's such a classic. Then I'll say a 10% discount code here. You can then say here which products or categories this should be applied to, as we can see. So either categories or products. In this case, we only have one product, so I select products once and select once here. You can even limit it to just variants, but in this case, I would like to do it to entire products, because otherwise that would confuse people, which is what we don't want. And here you can also say what the minimum things are for this. As an example, the person must spend at least 50 euros to be able to use code 10, or the person must purchase at least 2 things to use this code, or you say, no, that can be used whenever you want, many things are possible. That means it doesn't matter. And exactly here you can set the customer things. For example, is it valid for every customer or only for certain customer groups? So all the groups, like we can see here, or this is only possible for certain customers and is only restricted for certain customers. But in this case, I would like to have this for all customers. You can then do the following, for example. And then this is valid for all customers, for example. Then you can also say how often it can be used. Namely, if now only 10 customers in total can use it. If we want everyone to be able to use this, then we can simply leave it out. But you can also restrict it so that it can be used at least or maximum once per customer. That means if this is a welcome offer for new customers, then you can say, hey, you're not allowed to use this for the second order. You can only do that with this option so that you guys know too. Down here, you can also say, hey, can you combine this with other things? Because you could theoretically combine discount codes by saying, hey, free shipping plus a 10% discount. You can decide here. The default setting is that it cannot be combined with anything, either free discount or 10% or free shipping. And you can also say, hey, the person can either get a 10% discount and also use a free discount code, for example, like we can see here on my screen, so in the menu. And here you can also set the validity from when it is valid or until when it is valid. For example, if it is an event such as Christmas, autumn promotions, Black Week, Easter offers, etc. You can set everything up here, as you now know. And exactly, we first have to do the following, namely it has now expired. That is simply because we have selected an end date, which is exactly in the past. Click on Save Once, which we'll do briefly, and now that I've done that, it is active. And now when I add something to the cart, I now have the two things in there. I'm removing one and go into checkout. Then I get here on the right, the discount box, and then I can here enter welcome 10, and then I receive 10% discount. This will then be displayed here. Then let's go back again. And the same goes with gift cards. I could also go here under products and create a gift card under gift cards. As an example, here is create gift card. And now if someone uses this code here, copy it, and then once, here, goes in, instead of discount code, this is now used here. Then I use this gift card code once, like we can see here on my screen. If I go to gift cards here, for example, I can see how much value is still there or not, as we can see here. What you can still do here is, for example, so theoretically, I can create manual gift cards here and assign this code manually. This is possible once, or I can add a product here too, and once here at the top right, as we can see. Then you can, for example, here, enter gift card. Gift card. You can then add a description here, for example. And here you can do the following, for example, so that people can buy either 10, 25, 50 or 100 euro gift cards. Or for example, if someone shouldn't buy something for 100 euros or 10 euros is too little, you can say, hey, here, if you create a product now, you can simply delete it here or add other things here, for example, simply here. And then when I click save, then I just can buy the product here. And that's completely normal. Like all other things, I can now add categories, as we can see here. I can add product types. So like if you want to easily manage a product, and in the preview it would look like what we see now, like here. Of course, the recommendation here is that you also include a nice picture here, up here, that you show a gift card image, like here. And so people can then buy a gift card instead of a product. So if we go back now, we have actually almost finished discussing everything. So we always discussed all the points here from home. We have now created shop. We have added products. I also said which mistakes you should avoid. We have added a cookie banner. We have added shipping information. We have now added a few things and learned a lot of important things here. What we also have to do now is, once we have finished the shop, then of course advertisements have to be placed on it. Here we have to go under customer events, and then we have to install an external tracking solution, which is also important. The reason why you need an external tracking solution is simple. Since the iOS updates and other updates, platforms like Google, Facebook, TikTok and so on can no longer measure. And for marketing and scaling, it is simply important that you can measure everything in order to optimize marketing decisions and then use the ad budget efficiently. What works gets more budget, and what doesn't work gets less budget. That's why there are external tracking tools to measure everything precisely. As an example, if there were 10 orders, Facebook would only show 3 orders or 15 orders. That's simply because at the very beginning, Facebook doesn't track anything because they simply can't do it technically. The problem later is that they then simply start to estimate so that people invest, which means that you can also spend a lot of money. That's why there are external tracking tools that are not affected by these blockages between companies, such as our tool, Adverfly, and you can install this once to simply know exactly which advertisements bring orders into my shop and much more. And that is just extremely necessary so that you can easily know which advertising campaigns are working and which are not. Because you can therefore put more and more budget into the right ad campaigns so that you can scale up slowly but surely and not burn your ad budget. What works gets more budget, which means you simply have more profits, more sales, and better conversions. And I'll show you how to install Adverfly now. To do this, you simply have to do the following. Visit adverfly.com once. Here it is. On this page, you can of course also read about what functions there are, which platforms, etc. are available. And then you can then click on Start Free Trial Phase like we do here in Adverfly. You can then simply select the starter plan. Then you can simply add the payment information as we see here. Enter your name, enter your address, and then if necessary, purchase as a company. And then you can click on Start the Test Phase. The 7 days are free, Of course, you can cancel it at any time, like a Netflix subscription. And once you've done that, you'll end up on the following page, on this page. And here you can click on Shopify install, which we can see here on my screen, copy. There is also a video tutorial here. Then we can go to Shopify like here. Click on add custom pixel once. Afterward, delete this once. Paste. Click on save. And once on connect. This is how the Adverfly pixel was installed. And then we can take the next steps to get everything ready. Then we go back again. Then click next. Here you can connect to Facebook, i.e. with Facebook, by clicking on connect. Here you have to log in with a Facebook account, then click on connect. This message then appears, which we can see here. Then we can click next, like here. Then you would have to add the UTM parameters. You can then add these to the advertisements here. For example, on Facebook, add here at the bottom. And that was it. This means that once you have done that, from that moment on, you can, for example, measure the advertisements correctly again and also scale and optimize the right campaigns again. This would then look like this, for example. Then, for example, we have the dashboard here, which is nice, simple, and modern. Here, for example, we see the spend, as in the Facebook Ads Manager. For example, how much has been spent, how many sales have been made, what the ROAS is. And this is all based on measurements and almost in real time. And that means you don't work with estimates like Facebook or Google or something similar, which means that even false campaigns can be scaled, but these are all real measurements. That's why we can display everything in close to real time and not wait up to 72 hours like with Facebook. And here you can of course also switch between channels like we can see here. Everything is in one dashboard. You can also see, for example, where people come from organically. This is also possible here. For example, you can then set here at the top right whether these are only orders from new customers or returning customers, which is also very important for a company. What you can also see is that you also have a general overview. It would look like this. This means that you can see everything on a dashboard, for example, so that you can get new insights. The same applies to ROAS. If I click here now, what we're doing here briefly, then you can just see here the trend. That means everything in one dashboard. You can also switch between channels. Below you also have a general overview such as how many page views or sessions happened, and then how many people bought it. You can also see the progression up to the purchase. That would then look like this. And here you can see, for example, that 2,143 people bought directly organically. These are often returning customers, for example. What we see here, for example, is that very many people bought through Google Ads. That means a total of 1,468 people saw exactly one Google ad and then bought it, like we can see here. For example, down here we have 188 people who directly saw an Instagram ad and then bought it, as we can see here. That means you can just see all the connections between the platforms and what are the most popular customer journeys, the customer paths, and exactly. And of course, the same applies to returning customers and new customers, that you can differentiate between them. The advantage is simply that you can clearly see, hey, this ad, this path, this platform works better for new customers than existing customers, just to name one example of many. Because if we go back here again, we can simply see that over time, the number of returning customers has grown, and towards the end, it has become more and more, which is of course a very good sign. This is simply because you can easily separate existing customers versus new customers with Adverfly. And by being able to separate the two, you can simply place better and more targeted advertisements, because someone who knows the product and has already bought it, they probably want to see a different ad than someone who, for example, has never bought the product or doesn't know the product. You understand what I mean? You have to show other advertisements that explain the product, for example, or represent other USPs. As an example, to reach a returning customer. And exactly. And as a bonus, we will also analyze an example shop together, namely Gymshark. So, and I'll select the country very briefly and then we'll end up on the page. The advantage of Gymshark is simple. What you can see directly here, it goes straight to the point. As an example, you can see straight away that it's about clothing. I have to say this, it's simply because there are shops where at first I don't know what it's all about. And then if I scroll down, for example, this means that you have the products, product images with all the models. You can then differentiate between women and men. Also very simple to set up. You immediately know, hey, these are now things for women, these are now things for men, and here are just things, accessories and the like. This means that you can navigate faster. But what I would also do now is I would also analyze this from the mobile view, which is most important because this is simply because most people also buy via their mobile phones. That's why it's best to look at it from this view so that everything is perfect. And here we see, for example, that they added a picture on mobile phone. This is simply because it is probably better in terms of performance. And exactly. And if we then scroll down here again, then of course we still have the same structure here. For example, if we go to the most important page, which is the product page, where the purchasing decisions that are very important to us are often made, then we see here that it is kept very simple. That means all the things can breathe here. You can easily look at the pictures like this. Then we also have different sizes, for example. Much of it is now sold out. Then we have XL, for example, as we can see. For example, if a product is sold out, we also have the option to be notified, let's put it this way, when a product is back. This is also a very cool function, and you have probably used it yourself. And as you can see here, it's very, very simple, but very, very effective. Sometimes there are shops that have, let's say, add a lot of standard text, which means that everything is simply not good. Of course, this cannot be implemented for every product. That's why it's always so important to take the time to write texts that sell well. Here, for example, we have the area with the descriptions. When I have to unfold it, let's put it this way, the rest of the things come, especially for the people who really want to read it. And exactly, if you then go on to the checkout, everything is of course based on Shopify. This is also a Shopify shop from Gymshark itself. Then you can click on Add to Bag once, and then you can select the size. In that case, let's take L. And then we end up in the shopping cart. So then you can click on here. Of course, they also try to sell further upsells here, which you can also do. This way you can quickly and easily increase the shopping cart value for even more sales in your shop, so that you simply make more sales per order, which means you can spend more on advertising or actually makes more profit. And if I then go to the checkout, we end up here in the Shopify checkout. We just had it and it's extremely good, as we learned in the video today. And of course you can enter your email address here. So like in the checkout, when I open it again normally, which is what we just had, that means Shopify's checkout is very effective. What I can now say in general about Gymshark is that the shop structure at Gymshark is modern, but many people still do it wrong. This structure at Gymshark is very simple. This means that the customer simply has to feel comfortable. You just have to get to the points quickly when you're looking for something. And you shouldn't be overloaded with too much information or too little information either. And above all, you have to work a lot with high-resolution images. So that's it for this video. If you have any further questions, feel free to ask this question in the comments. And if you want to see more videos like this, feel free to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and then I would say see you in the next video. Until then, you're Ejan from Adverfly.